Join Mike, Brook, and Amari as they dive into the shifting Cleveland real estate market and why midterm rentals could be the smartest play. With match day approaching, med students and professionals are searching for quality rentals, learn how to attract the right tenants, and maximize returns. Plus, insights on when to sell, how to screen tenants effectively, and why numbers never lie in real estate investing. All this and more on the Cleveland Real Estate Investor Podcast.
Hi, everybody. This is Mike Riley, and with me is my team, my Cleveland Real Estate Investor team, Amari Clancy and Brook Riley. How are you guys doing?
Good. Very good.
Now, Brook is a homeowner and Amari is a renter, and neither one of them is a landlord yet, unlike me. But Brook and Amari run the Riley Properties portfolio, and we are in the process of going through our next iteration of how we're going to handle our real estate portfolio. So, Brook, you want to give the people sort of a summary of what we're doing now, and then I'll add in my backstory.
Yeah, I think what we've been doing is really analyzing the numbers, what properties have been profitable, and taking a look at those. And if they are not profitable, we are going to list them and try to sell them.
That's right. Well, it's a fascinating journey we've taken. We bought our first property. That was Ellesmere 1, that's what we call it, back in 2003. And it was a way of keeping our Riley painting and contracting company gainfully employed during the wintertime when we were slow. And we didn't exactly, in fact, no, we didn't know what we were getting into because we thought we were going to flip the house. We're going to fix it up. We put a jacuzzi tub in the second floor bathroom. We put high-end air conditioning, and then we listed a price that would recap or recoup what we had spent on the retail side, on the contracting side, and then make a little profit, and the thing just sat there. And then a couple months later, we decided we were gonna, let's just throw it out for rent, and within one day, we got a renter at $1,875. And that we were off and running. And so we were buying a house every year for a couple of years, and then the crash came in 2009, and we bought a ton of properties because our contracting business was doing well. We had cash to spend, and it was basically a fire sale on properties that were just sitting there languishing. And we started fixing up properties, and then we started renting them. And then, lo and behold, I think it was around 2014, 13, 15, after we had a fiasco with a long-term tenant, we decided we were going to rent short-term. And we got a Cleveland Indians pitcher, and I said to myself, this is where we need to be. So we got into the short-term Airbnb market probably about 8 years ago. And back then, being in short-term furnished Airbnb was like owning a computer in the early 80s or going on the internet in the late 90s. People didn't know what it was, but there was a huge need. Well, fast forward post-COVID, everybody and their dog is now in short-term furnished Airbnb. So when everybody and their dog is in one field, it is time for us to exit, which we are in the process of doing. We're still going to maintain a small toehold on the Airbnb market, but we are exiting, we are selling our properties, and we are advising our clients to get into what I call the midterm, mid to long-term rental. And that is why I have titled this podcast, Magic Matching Day, because coming up is matching day. where med students who graduated from med school are now getting matched up to hospitals where they're going to do their residency. And all these great, hardworking, smart, young doctors to be who are backed up with their parents are looking for a place to stay, to place to rent, not to buy, but to rent. So that's where we are right now. Your comments, Amari? I'm going to move to you, and then we'll go to Brook. Thoughts on our evolution here?
Yeah, well, this whole conversation that we've been having, in the office, on the podcast, and just in terms of the properties, just always makes me think of that one part of Rich Dad Poor Dad where he says, it's either a liability or an asset. And it's pretty black and white with a lot of these properties as far as which category they fall into. You don't want to just fall into the romanticism of being a sexy, cool real estate mogul. You just
Yeah.
just study the numbers and, as Brooke says, and make judgments objectively from there. It's simple enough for me to understand as someone who is, just really learning a lot from the beginning about just managing my own finances and personal budget and savings and investing and stuff like that. It's really that simple. You don't have to overcomplicate it, but at the same time, you still have to be decisive and think about the future for your investments.
Your thoughts, Brook?
Yeah, I mean, numbers don't lie, especially when it comes to accounting and investments. You have to make a decision that's not an emotional decision, but a strategic decision. And I think we don't have to get into the details of some of these houses, but some of the numbers, when you punch them all, are pretty alarming, just of how it's just a no-brainer to sell these real kind of stinker houses. And the good thing is, like, I toured a couple of these homes yesterday with a realtor. The good thing is they're furnished, because we're using them as short-term Airbnbs, so there's no need to stage them. And B, we do such a good job of keeping them clean and updated that we walked through all of them, and the realtor was like, "All right, these are ready." So that's a good thing. There's not a
And if they don't sell, and all of a sudden we get a call out of left field from a Cleveland Guardians player, which we have, they want to rent for us for 6 months at top dollar. There we go. Now they're only holding off because he's a young player, and they're going to make sure that they actually make the team before they commit to a lease. So, anyways, Brooke, keep going.
Yeah, no, I just you want to make a decision that's not based around emotions. You want to stick to the facts, stick to the numbers, and luckily I think the market is still slightly a seller's market. We got the spring market coming up. So for match day, like you said, it's residents and doctors are looking for a rental. Who knows? There might be someone who wants to buy a house. You never know. I know when I sold my second house, Wyatt, it was around when match day was last year or 2 years ago. And I got a couple of bites from, out of state med students. But my buyers turned out to be, like me and my wife, young first time homeowners. It was a cool house. So everything all kind of worked out.
Right. Well, if you're going to stay in the rental game, matching day is a great opportunity. I mean, there's certain windows where you really have to take advantage of. Not a lot of windows are high probability of somebody renting for 6 months to a year in February. Usually it's June 1, May, June, where they're going to start their lease for a year. They may want a 2-year lease if they're going to, go to residency. So you've got to be understanding what the windows for a long-term rental is. That's number one. Number two, credit. The credit score has to be rock solid. Somebody says credit needs work, just throw it in the garbage can. It's not worth it. If their credit is bad, there's a reason. So bad credit means you got a bad tenant. The last thing you need is a bad tenant, because your margins are not going to be as high as they are with short term. With short term, they got to pay up front, and they're paying that kind of money. They're already qualified as a good tenant. But you get somebody whose life is in chaos, it's usually reflected in their credit score. Your thoughts on that, Amari?
Yeah, it's going to be reflected on their credit score and reflected on your last year numbers when you have to look at why a property underperformed, because you had to deal with the massive headache of a problem tenant. It's just like a sore spot on a spreadsheet of money uncollected, potential damages to the property, God forbid, potential legal fees. It's just a whole can of worms that could be handled on the front end with, very scrutinized and serious vetting on the front end, which, as you said, just comes down to a couple things. One of the major things being credit score. So,
well, when you think about a bad tenant, the first thing that comes to mind is that they're not paying the rent, right?
right.
But the reality is, it's the second thing that about a bad credit. Or you got 2A and you got 2B. 2A, they're not paying the rent. They're stringing it along. They're basically unacknowledged grifter. I mean, they're always have an excuse for not paying their rent.
Right.
They're going to pay the cable bill, because if they don't pay the cable bill, boom, no cell phone, no internet, Wi-Fi, no cable shows, right? And cable company doesn't give a shit that you're working on your credit. But 2B is the real kicker, and that is they basically destroy the house. I mean, you go in and you're going to have to do almost not just a repaint, but you're going to have to do a total rehab on this property. So bad credit, you don't want to take. You want to add to that, Brook?
Yeah, I mean, those are always pretty big warning signs. I think the other huge one is, and this applies to if you're looking to hire someone, call the previous landlord or call the previous employer, because they'll give you, because they're doing exactly what you're going through. So they'll give you, the honest feedback that a report sometimes won't.
Yeah, well, I've had people call me inquiring about a person that I knew was toxic. And I didn't want to say they were toxic because I didn't want them turning around and suing me. Maybe they're a member of the Trump family or something. I mean, you look sideways and people are just going to sue you.
Defamation.
So I had to say cryptically, well, I'm afraid to venture an opinion because I might get sued. I'm not defaming anybody, right?
That's it.
Or here's another one who's inquiring about, working. Well, does the guy show up and work? When he shows up, he's great. So it's one of those read between the lines. But I mean, again, these are the dirty little secrets about renting. Here's number 3 on renting to keep in mind, and that's the hidden costs. I mean, everybody's going to put, the ABCs of being a mogul, right, Amari? You're a mogul landlord. I've got this portfolio. Boy, that portfolio, when you throw that word out, you sound like $1 million, right? You're not using words like piggy bank or money's in the jar in the mattress. I mean, you got a portfolio.
Right.
But the reality is, when you own property, if you're not making at the end of the day net profit of 5 to 6% on this property, it's not worth owning that property. You could stick it in a money market fund and make 5 or 6%. It's not sexy. You can't walk around bragging about how many houses you have. But the reality is, when you add up all the costs of owning a property, and I mean adding up all the costs, like you're counting calories, count everything, count the time on the weekend that you had to go out and do a repair on one of your properties. Did you write down what the cost of that is? Now multiply that through the year and you get the true cost of owning a property. You're going to find that after it's all said and done, you'd be lucky to make 2 or 3%. And turn to our money guy, our Moneyball analyst, Brook Riley. Go ahead, Brook, add to that.
Hey, let's stop here. We got to pay some bills. 30 seconds, and we'll be back. If you've been listening to this podcast, then you understand or should understand the pitfalls of investing in Cleveland real estate. Say you're looking for an investment property to rent, and these are the things that could happen and often do. You overpay for a house, and it's in the ghetto. Then you find that it's a money pit with endless surprise repairs. Your hapless property manager, who may be the brother-in-law of the realtor, gets a tenant who after 3 months stops paying the rent. Then the toilet explodes, and you have nobody to repair it because, guess what? The property manager is not answering the phone. Yep, that's the ugly side of the Cleveland real estate market. But we have a solution. Buy one of our properties. It's been inspected. It's been vetted. It's in a rock-solid part of town. It comes with a gold star tenant paying top dollar rent, and we manage it. Call us at 216-371-8160 if you're interested.
Yeah, I mean, the return on investment, you should have that number, like that threshold. And if you're well below that, then, it's time to look at letting go of that investment. It's like a stock. If it's totally crippling your portfolio, then you need to, look at, okay, what's going on? Is this just a mini kind of digression, or is this like the real deal? It's like what Amari said. It's either a liability or it's an asset. So,
Yeah, well, we've got a handful of clients that we've been actually managing their properties. Some have actually bought one of our properties, and they're not losing money. But if they're positioned in a short-term, extreme short-term, kind of that Airbnb platform where you're renting it out 1 week, 2 weeks, there's been some headwinds in the last year and a half. We've experienced it. They've experienced it. And so we are now counseling them to lower their expectations and move to what I call the midterm to long term. Now, what are we at, Amari? Rule number 3 or rule number 4?
3.
Okay, rule number 3. Rule number 3 is the shorter the lease, the more you charge per rent. So let's use you've got a nice 3-bedroom, long-term lease is $2,000, right? Long-term lease for 1 year is $2,000. And don't go more than a year. In fact, somebody may say, well, I want a 3-year lease. So you know what? We're not doing it. If their credit score is like 800 or 700, okay, yeah, maybe entertain that 3-year. But you don't necessarily lock into a lease because you may not own that house for 3 years unless you're going to sell it to another investor. But let's use that 1 year. 1 year at $2,000 plus utilities, and then put in put in think about getting creative on that lease. What you make them responsible for: cut the grass, plow the driveway. 'Cause we're in Cleveland, so we get some days when there's some weather. They're in charge of all utilities, obviously, but then put them in charge of small repairs, toilet, any small repairs, as if they're owning the property. The more you can chip away at all these nickel and dime expenses, the higher your net's going to be. Now, if they say, well, I want a 6-month rent because I'm buying a house or building a house, I don't know how long I'm going to be in it, then you want to treat that as a kind of longer version of a short-term rental. Now you're up to 2,500. And if they want to go month to month after 6 months, it's 2,500, but they got to give you 60 days notice, not 30 days, 60 days if they want to tack on another month. So that 2,500 over 6 months, what's that? 15,000, Brook?
Yeah.
All right. So that's 15,000. And they're probably going to add on another, usually it's another 2 months, because it's going to take them longer to build a house or whatever. So you just add another 3,000. Now you're up to 18,000, and you've just done what, 8 months? You got 4 months to go. So you're at $18,000, and you haven't had to pay utilities. You haven't had to pay the lawn. You haven't had to pay small repairs, right? So add that to it, and then compare that to what you would have made on an Airbnb and what you would have made on a conventional 1 year. Because if you're doing that 6 month plus 2 month extension, you still got 4 months to fill. What are the chances you're going to be able to fill that? You're going to have to allow for probably a 2-month vacancy, as you switch gears and you get another tenant in there. And what happens if they are, and this is important, what happens if their lease is up in February? You got to think now. Let's go back to rule number 1, the windows of opportunity. Well, not much of a window there in February or March. I mean, we're in March right now, and I can tell you it's not exactly Palm Springs here. So it's a dead of winter. There's more hibernation going on in Cleveland. So that's number 3. Your thoughts, Amari?
I would say that as far as how you mentioned, getting creative on the lease, you have to be able to factor in the true cost of these bookings. Like you mentioned, it's like maybe they take care of the lawn, maybe they take care of the cleaning. I feel like the person, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the person that is open to that and they're like, yeah, I just, I need to get this place. And, they're not as concerned with the resources that they have to spend on it. They don't mind having to, make the bed or whatever. That's usually the kind of person that we want to work with because, they're easy to work with on those kinds of things versus a Karen, who's given each situation the white glove treatment and still might not be, want to find any reason not to pay or,
Right.
problem later on. It becomes a huge headache.
Right. Right. I think one thing to add to what you're saying, Amari, I was thinking about this because Amari's involved in the hiring, for the last 8 years. So he's seen the good, bad, and ugly. Hiring an employee for a company is like hiring a renter. I mean, it's both the same thing. You're taking on somebody. They need a place to stay, like they need a job. You need a worker, or you need to have this house filled. So there is a transactional nature to this relationship. But you want to make sure that transactional nature is 50-50, not 80-20. So if you've got that person who's got bad credit, and this bleeds into number 4, which is attitude. What is the attitude of that person looking for a job? If their attitude is, hey, thank you for giving me the opportunity, that's an A+.
Right.
If their attitude is, the man is squeezing me, look at how much money he's making, and he's only paying me this, that obviously is a terrible attitude. Well, the same thing goes with somebody who's coming in to rent your house. They understand what you need as a landlord. Okay? So if I'm talking to somebody who has really lousy credit, usually they're extremely narcissistic in that the world revolves around them. Most people that are in that camp have a total lack of awareness, which is what a narcissist is. And they don't make the connection between maybe their credit's bad because they didn't pay their bills on time, right? Okay, I don't understand why my credit's so bad. I mean, I stiffed this person. I didn't pay my rent for 2 months at these people that were out of town landlords. I don't know why my credit's so bad. This is unfair. Society is stacked against the little man. All this bullshit you got to listen to. That's a relationship that's 90-10. It's not 50-50. It's 90% to them and 10% to you. So, yeah, they understand that they got to pay the rent, but they don't understand that maybe I shouldn't destroy the house. So, your thoughts, Brook?
Yeah, I mean, just like a tenant or an employee, there's always, those first couple weeks or days, those are always real telltale signs as who they're going to be as a tenant or an employee. Are they constantly, sending you emails saying, hey, the light bulb's out in the fridge and, oh, I saw an ant in the back porch, all that crap. For an employee, always being 10, 15 minutes late every day, not wearing the clothes they're supposed to. So you can really judge when you've got within that, at the starting point, I would say.
Right. And that's where, to wrap this all up, that's where matching day is magic day. Because you get somebody who's graduated from medical school. I think most of the time, 99% of the time, these people are they're pretty responsible. The nice thing about a resident, they work 6-7 days a week. They're never there. Believe me, they're the last people that are having some late night party. They're the last person that the neighbors are going to call because they got boyfriend problems, right? So that's what you got to keep in mind. So we have a window coming up, all you property moguls, right, Amari?
Yeah, right.
It's coming up, and we want to be able to position ourselves like bears at the salmon run to grab some of these young doctors. So I'm going to go around the horn. Final thoughts on matching day, Amari, then Brook.
Great time for carnivores.
But all right, Brook.
It's a liability or an asset, in terms of a lot of what we talked about with investment properties. And I think that even applies to your tenants and who you hire. Don't make arbitrary emotional decisions about these things and know your numbers. That's my real answer.
Okay, final thoughts, Brook.
Yeah, I mean, know your numbers. Don't bullshit the numbers. Put everything down on a spreadsheet, and you're either making money or you're losing money.
Right, and know your numbers. Like every time you have to get involved in something, to pick up the phone, you have to show a house, you have to show another house, you have to get a new tenant in, you got to write the lease. You write all of that time down that you're spending. Because if you have a money market fund, the only job you're doing is opening the envelope and looking at what you just made, right? That's it. That's the only effort you're doing. So make sure you're really looking at all the numbers, and then you can make an informed decision there. Okay, guys, thanks for your time. Amari, be the engineer. Wrap this thing up.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
All right.
Okay, guys. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Cleveland Real Estate Investor Podcast with Mike Riley. Please add our show or follow us on Spotify, Overcast, Apple Podcast, or Spotify. Leave a like or comment on the video. All engagement is appreciated. Subscribe to us on YouTube as well for video content coming soon. For any Cleveland listeners or Cleveland Browns fans, you can check out our other podcast, Cleveland Browns Anonymous, for our weekly group therapy session. This is also on all the same platforms as the Cleveland Real Estate Investor.